Raw News and Politics did a in-depth reading of the January 6th transcripts and found something fascinating, which is that there is no way to view it where Trump did not have foreknowledge of what was going to happen, of the coup plot. And in fact, looks like Scott Perry from Pennsylvania's 10th, I believe, also knew this. Let's look at what she had to say.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. So there's a ton of new information being reported. This is all based on the select committee transcripts and their final report. So I'm trying to compile all of the most eyebrow-raising details, and I'm going to be sharing everything in various segments like I did yesterday about Cassidy Hutchinson. So first up is Donald Trump's fake electors plot. There are new conflicting stories about how it all came to be. Election denying attorney Cleta Mitchell, who you guys have probably heard of, she told the committee that Utah Senator Mike Lee is the one who conceived of the plan and then disseminated the plan. She told the committee, quote, "There were a group of people who were discussing that. I don't know that it wasn't my idea. It was actually Mike Lee's idea."
Blaming each other.
So Mitchell also said that Lee referred to this alternate slate of electors as, quote, "the sweet spot." And this is in regard, what he meant was this was in regard to getting other Republicans on board. However, the committee's final report states that there were two businessmen from Texas who met with Trump about a week after the 2020 election. And the report says they're the ones who posited the idea of using fake electors to override the will of the voter. According to the committee's final report, Morgan Warsler and a man named John S. Robeson met with Trump in the White House on November 10th to try to push this idea of the fake electors.
Could not have two more 1920s general store owner sounding names. It's irrelevant, just thought I'd toss that in there.
And then Robeson even followed up with an email to, quote, "explain the move forward plan for what we discussed." And even Trump's deputy chief of staff, Dan Scavino, later called Robeson's email, quote, "batshit crazy." And I guess you have to give this guy
Good
credit,
Lord.
though, because
Dan Scavino, if Dan Scavino is telling you something's crazy, it's crazy.
instead of denying his involvement in the coup, Robeson is doubling down on this batshit crazy idea. He recently tweeted out, quote, "I'm in the Jan 6th report. Sweet. Trump should have listened to me." And in June of 2022, Warsler tweeted out that he had the, quote, "whole Trump team in Oval," and, quote, "state legislatures can choose the electors no matter what current state law or state courts say." So these guys aren't even trying to hide it. And you might ask, how did they come to talk with Trump? How did they end up at the White House? Once again, all roads lead back to Congressman Scott Perry. This guy is in it deep. He is in so much trouble.
I'm going to be looking
Apparently,
a lot closer to him.
that's how they know Trump. That's how they met him. They're connected to Scott Perry and other people within the Republican Party.
Fun fact, you want to know how investigative journalism works? This right here. That's a thread, and you pull at it. So you find out, okay, now we know these two guys which pitched the fake electors plot know Scott Perry. Then you ask, how do they know him? Then you look into their business dealing or whatever that answer is, you look for more detail. With Republicans, it just about never fails to turn up a crime. It is genuinely shocking. If you ever wonder why news people just seem bitter and pessimistic and furious a lot of the time, the more local you go, the more you'll get this. Unless they're so young, they don't even do this stuff. That's why. The injustice is maddening. It's maddening. But she's on fire. Let's let it keep on burning.
In Texas. So it's still unclear, which came first, these chickens or these illegal eggs. I mean, who originally conceived of this illegal scheme? What we do know is that Trump and some of his allies were directly involved in the plot, at least in the state of Nevada. The committee interviewed two fake electors from Nevada, the Republican State Party leader, Michael McDonald, not that Michael McDonald, and also a man named Jim Graffenreid, I think is how you pronounce it. He's a Republican National Committee member. These were two of the fake electors in Nevada. According to the report, each of these men pleaded the fifth hundreds of times when they were interviewed by the committee. But the evidence shows that Trump and others in his orbit were directly involved in calling the shots. And the fake electors planning apparently began before the election even took place. Days before, the committee was able to obtain texts, emails, they said, internal GOP memos, handwritten documents even, which show that, for example, McDonald had a conference call with Trump, Mark Meadows, his chief of staff, and Rudy Tooty Giuliani, as well as Eric Trump. This was the day after the election. Following that meeting, McDonald texted a contact and he said, quote, "They want full attack mode. We're going to have a war room meeting in about an hour." And in one of de Graffenreid's texts,
pause it there for a second. So all of this is to say, this is before any of these court cases were decided. Day after the election, before they're filed. So even assuming all of his actions are in the best light, he's coming up with plans for how to get around the results of an election before he's even had a chance for the courts to determine whether or not any of this is true, before his own Justice Department had a chance to investigate any of his wild claims. It all speaks to the fact that his wild claims were just that, and he knew it.
He all but admits that Trump didn't really win. He and others were going back and forth. They were discussing whether or not they thought that the Republican Secretary of State for Nevada would sign off on their alternative electors. So Graffenreid writes in this text chain, quote, "She might do a lot of things, but sending a slate of Republican electors without them being clearly the winners of the popular vote is not one of them." So they knew that Trump didn't win, or they at least doubted it, the popular vote in Nevada, but they continued to push this unconstitutional plan. They met and signed a phony certification anyway.
By itself, that's a crime. By itself, that is a crime. We're waiting on charges for these people. Problem is, if you charge them, you have to charge the people they conspired with. And those people are powerful. And they, in America, the unwritten rule is they're untouchable. Unless we stop putting up with it. Again, DOJ link in the description.
This guy who just said in the text message, yeah, I don't know if she's going to sign off on it, given that, we don't know that he actually won. But he went and put his name on the dotted line saying, yes, Trump actually won this state.
Point of contention. Popular vote. I realize she's saying popular vote in the state. Could be argued to say that he was talking about popular vote in the country. That's different. You can be president without winning the popular vote. That is a flaw in our system, but them's the rules we agreed to when we participated in the election ourselves. No Republican president has won the popular vote, as a matter of fact. Since the 90s. Did George H.W. Bush win the popular vote? I don't believe so, but I have to check that. But it's been longer than a lot of folks' lifetimes. It's certainly been, 30 years? I mean, they rely on gerrymandering. They rely on the rules being bent in their favor to get in office at all.
These people have far more culpability than others, in my opinion. They cynically went along with something that they knew to be false, strictly for their own political gain and their
Boom.
agenda.
Get them.
There are true believers out there. And at least with the true believers, they're just gullible, right? They're not
True.
evil. They just got played. They just fell for another one of Trump's lies. But these guys knew the truth, and they committed potential crimes on Trump's behalf. So I have no empathy for them, no sympathy. Whatever happens, they deserve it. They all need to go down. Now, if they can flip some of these people, I mean, you've got it in
That's
writing,
what you do.
which is one of the things everyone has said. Trump doesn't do anything in writing. I mean, you still don't have Trump texting, but you have people putting him in the room and in the conversations. So if they can get enough people to corroborate each other's stories, plus they have this evidence, these text messages of people speaking freely at the time, thinking that there weren't going to be any consequences for their actions. You get enough of them, a jury will convict.
Absolutely true. Link to that video is in the description. It was Raw News and Politics. It's a new channel as well. I mean, she just did a heck of a job. Well, we focus so much on Trump today because it's important that we not forget this. Because that is how, as I always say, these cover-ups work in our government. In America, that is how Republican crime gets hidden. Time plus the American attention span. Enough of us forget, or enough of us decide we're just not going to say anything about it. We're not going to rock the boat. And then when there is a lull in interest, that is when the prosecutor will do a very brief press conference where they say, yada, 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 we have concerns about this, yada, 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 we couldn't find enough evidence. Because they chose not to look for it. It was pretty clear Garland hadn't collected the evidence that the January 6th committee had access to. They were surprised to learn it when the Jan 6 committee first rolled out their findings. There is a serious conversation to be had in the happy epilogue to this story, if we get one, about charges for Merrick Garland. Genuinely. But first, we have to deal with the people who are actively trying to get other Americans killed. Donald Trump is number one. DOJ contact linked in the description. If you want to know how effective just one person is, did a video yesterday with Sam Cedar talking about that. Incredibly effective. Incredibly effective. The Department of Justice is not used to being contacted at all. If 20 people write them emails, they're going to be shocked. It's not trained in the American consciousness to actually reach out to our officials. It's certainly not trained in the progressive consciousness. We are always told that the only way we can get things done is if 10,000 of us gather in the street and do a march. A lot's changed since Martin Luther King's day. Write the damn email. We cannot let this guy walk around free anymore. You don't have to tell Merrick Garland you think he ought to be in prison. I do think that. But when I write him in 5 minutes, I'm not going to mention that. That'll be to my representative after Trump is in handcuffs. What I'm going to write Merrick Garland is that Trump ought to be in handcuffs. I'm going to mention the two ladies. I'm going to mention his Truth Social messages. I'm going to write him tomorrow as well. And I'm going to write him the next day. You don't have to do it that often. Write one email. Let him see that at least a handful of Americans care, if for no other reason, so that you can look your kids and grandkids in the eyes, should you have them. So that you can look your fellow Americans in the eyes and know that you didn't abandon them. You did your part in the fight. Write the email.